Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Johanna Martinez, and we're going to talk about the guide to positive disruption. Before we get into that, Johanna, where can people find you?
Best place to find me is on LinkedIn. Look for Johanna Martinez, and if you find too many of us, put in Johanna Martinez procurement or supply chain, and I'll pop up.
Because you've got an extensive background in well, you started off in engineering, which
That's correct.
for anybody over the age of, I don't know, 30, I'm guessing you're just over the age of 30. and is because it's a male dominated I one of the things that I do when I interview people, there's people that are watching that will go, I want to be something like that. And so first question I always ask is, how did you get to be where you are? And you did engineering, which was a very male dominated space. You went into procurement, which again generally is quite male dominating. So what is your journey? How have you got to where you are?
It's funny. I think the foundation is the fact that I have no brothers.
Right.
I have two sisters, and my dad desperately wanted a son and desperately wanted to be an engineer. And somewhere along the line, when I tested really high in school, they did an aptitude test in grammar school, and I tested very high in the sciences. He encouraged me to look at engineering as a career. Now, the funny thing is, he encouraged that, but it never dawned on me, and it never dawned on him to spend any time doing engineering type things together, right?
Right.
I never built anything. I never worked on a car. So I went to engineering school, and it was like, oh my goodness, look at what all these people know already. How am I going to catch up? But I did eventually, and it worked just fine. And I went to a school where my freshman class was 490 people, of which 5 were women.
Yeah.
And I went from, going through school where there are many more women than men, and suddenly being in this environment, I needed to learn very quickly how to adapt and how to cope and how to not lose myself in all of that. So I, out of school, had the good fortune of going to work for Johnson & Johnson, which is very decentralized, has everything from entrepreneurial startups to very big process-driven, rules-driven, businesses. And it was like working for 10 different kinds of companies during the time I was there. I got a wonderful grounding. I got to do all kinds of different things, everything from being a manufacturing manager to dealing with quality and customer service and engineering and all that kind of stuff. So it was really the best choice without realizing it. I think I made the best choice that I could have made, as a very young engineer. And J&J was was and continues to be very, blind to, gender, diverse status or whatever. Everybody gets a chance. And it was a wonderful opportunity for me to get to do things and not have this, oh, she's a woman, she can't do it, ahead of her. And I did a stint in procurement, loved it, and decided that what I wanted to do was go to companies that didn't have the resources that J&J had and figure out how to create procurement organizations or fix procurement organizations that were broken.
Because you said to me, and I don't know, that you went into a number of companies where in effect where you went into the front door and your predecessor was being taken out in handcuffs at the same time.
Yep.
I said it. I don't know if you were going to say it, but I wanted to say that.
So it makes for a very interesting personal dynamic when your predecessor got arrested for fraud.
Yeah.
And in one case in particular, it was a number of people who got arrested, and the position had been open for 2 years because they were afraid to bring someone in, and finally had the auditor saying to them, you just have too much spend. There's too much going on here for you to not have somebody in this role. So I learned a lot about stakeholder engagement. I do some workshops now and some speaking about stakeholder engagement,
Yep.
and I don't have a PhD. I don't have a master's degree in human resources. I have the practical experience of having an entire organization watching my every move,
The
trying to
university of
figure
love.
out, yes, exactly, how I was going to cheat them.
So against all that background, you dropped into organizations and you sorted them out. Pretty much, you may even have people, as you said, were watching you, or in effect, the old guard may even still be there. People even may have not were party to what was going on, and they may have not been taken out in handcuffs. So there was all
Yeah, there
kinds
may
of
have been a few stragglers, right?
yeah. There was all kinds of politics going on. And then what you did was that you sat down and you wrote a book called The Guide to Positive Disruption.
Right.
So talk us through the inspiration for that.
Right. So I had a year early in my career where I accomplished nothing, zero.
Right.
There were rumors of a reorganization. I had at the time a husband in graduate school. I was the only person working. I was a nervous wreck, and I just kept my head down. I kept under the radar. And at the end of the year, though, when I had to sit and write my accomplishments, I'm not a bad writer, but I have to tell you, I'm looking at the paper saying, oh my God, what am I going to say? I have accomplished nothing. I did nothing. And said, wow, it was time for some introspection. You can't have a career like this. You can't live a life like this
Yes.
of just keeping your head under the radar. Right. So, so I decided that I needed to be bolder and develop a bit of a plan B for myself. What would happen? I spent some time on the weekends going for walks, introspectively saying, what would be the worst thing that could happen? If I lose my job, where would we live? How would we do it? What would we do, et cetera? And I sort of, after a while, kind of got a plan, so that I knew in the back of my brain that it wouldn't be the end of the world, that I could manage through it, and that, everything would be okay, so that I could take a little bit of risk and, not have my head buried down. In fact, because I realized something else. We are always in a state of disruption, right? Pandemics are a new kind of disruption,
Yes.
but government regulations, competitors, acquisitions, divestitures, whatever it is, over the course of one's career, there are a number of disruptions that take place. And I actually counted 18. Someone said something to me about disruptions, I don't know, maybe 5 years into my career.
Yeah.
And from that point forward, I started tracking, and I lived through
Yeah.
18 massive disruptions where I didn't know when I left on Friday, I didn't know whether I was going to have a job on Monday or
Yeah.
what that job was going to be. So
Yeah.
you learn how to kind of cope with that. And I realized that people were making decisions all the time about me, right? Would I be the one who stayed, or would I be the one who went? And that if I kept my head down and if I didn't accomplish something, how was anybody going to decide that it was going to be me? Right? How would I make myself stand out? And so I became a disruptor. I decided that the way to do this was to thrive in this world of disruption was to make positive changes and be the one not afraid to put the technology in, not afraid to do something differently, to change up the supply chain, to change the method, to suggest a different method of distribution or a different, supplier, along the way, or a different kind of package or whatever. And by doing that, I was able to create a number of accomplishments that I could articulate to someone. So when I was in a disruptive situation and people were making decisions about me, I had something that was a little bit different.
Yeah.
And Tim, I'll tell you, that really came home to me a number of years later when I was in a company and we were searching for someone to lead a travel program. And we posted, the position on the web. And the next morning we had 400 responses.
Wow.
And we used, like a search engine to help us, ferret out the people who had the right keywords and things, and almost all of them did. And you looked and said, wow, all of these people established a policy, increased adherence, saved money, etc. How do we choose the people who would be the right people, to come and work for us? Now, we made a terrible decision. We actually started by looking at the subway lines. This was in New York City. And we said, well, who lives nearby? This job is going to require a lot of time. Maybe we want somebody with a quick commute, and we'll start there. Now, that's a terrible reason, right?
It is, yes.
One of my great failures. And eventually we realized the error in that and found the right person. But that was another example of, you're looking at a whole lot of fish in the pond. Help me find the goldfish. Help me find the person who is going to be the right person, who stands out because they've done something different, or they've talked about it differently. Because if you're trying to create disruption in your firm, you can't populate your team with people who are going to be hiding with their heads low. You need to populate your team with people who are going to be out there, making change and making things happen.
And I know it's one of the things that they always say about recruitment is, don't recruit people who are just like you. But I mean, there's, when you recruit people, the things that you're looking for are multifaceted. But I agree with you. You're looking for people that are going to stand up for that change and actually embrace it as well. Because if you are going to do something within the supply chain, and if you're going to change something, you need to make sure that if things don't quite go as planned, that those people are stand fast, right, and don't just break and fall over.
And, people in supply chain have such a great opportunity to do that, because there's more and more data and more ways to get at that data, than there were when I started. So I had the lucky experience of doing an analysis, and the analysis showed that for the consumer product I was responsible for, it took 90 days to make it. Now, the company would have never guessed that it took 90 days to make it. But in fact, with all of the inventory and all of the bad processes and all the wait time and some redundancies in the supply chain, in fact, that's what it took. And the company was they were aghast. In fact, so many people checked my work that there was great skepticism as to whether or not what I had done was accurate. And it turned out to be accurate. And it made them step back and rethink, how do we do this? How do we eliminate this? How do we do this differently, faster? How do we get these processes more in line to make it happen? And that was so powerful for me, because it was like, wow, I'm just like a little engineer sitting here, and with this data and with this analysis, look at the change I was able to make happen. And all I did was actually say, hey, I'm working on this project here, and I look this and I keep coming up with the same number. It's 90 days to do this. Does that make sense? And va-boom. And now that there's data everywhere. And I believe firmly, you just have to kind of pick your area and kind of focus in, and the data is going to lead you to great ideas about bad processes and ways to make positive disruptions.
So in terms of positive disruptions, one of the things that is key for that is stakeholder engagement and alignment. So talk about that. What's your advice to people about that?
All of us have a certain way we like to do things. Some are introverts, extroverts, love people, don't love people, like the analysis, don't like the analysis, whatever. And we have our comfort zone. And when we're sitting in our offices and doing whatever analysis or piece of work we're doing, we can kind of operate in our comfort zones. But when you're out trying to sell your ideas, trying to build relationships within your business, it's not about you, it's about them. And it's so hard to do that. If you have someone like your CFO, perhaps, who is very numbers oriented, well, you don't go in with a big, even if it's your boss, you don't go in with just a big idea that you haven't spent a couple of minutes thinking through what are the costs and what are the potential benefits, even if the numbers are very preliminary and are way off. You adapt your own style to the styles of the community that you're working with. And we have so much to offer, right? Everyone sitting out there listening to this has something that they're good at, has something. They have that elevator speech that consultants used to talk about, how to sell themselves to a senior executive. If you find yourself in an elevator with them for a minute, everybody's got their elevator speech polished. But often those elevator speeches are about them. Here's what I bring to the party.
Yeah.
It's not about, here's how I can help you. Here's what is in your business strategy and how what I'm doing can make a difference to your business strategy.
Yeah.
And that mindset is kind of a hard one to get around. And I talk to people about different methods of approaching, analyzing their own way of doing things, and then sort of approaching the people in their business and figuring out what to do. And for the same project, for the same idea, in the same company, there's a lot of adaptation. You might have that numbers person. You might have the people person. You might have, somebody who's too busy. They don't want to see you. They don't want to talk to you. And you've got to learn to go in, make your case and get out because they don't want to sit and chat. And then you have the ones who want to sit and chat. So you have to kind of take your toolkit and build your toolkit and pull out the right tool for the right situation that you're in.
So you've done a lot of process improvement. So how do you go about that?
Well, it's about, there's so many different places to find it, right? There are, opening your mind to the fact that processes that get put in place make sense when they get put in place.
Usually on a Friday afternoon, I think that they're put into place.
Yeah.
And people, if we just do this quickly, we can go home,
Yeah,
and then it's there for 10 years.
But but then also there's a senior executive who wants to see something a certain way because it's comfortable for he or for her based on prior jobs.
We did it like that in my last company.
Really?
It's quite often what people say,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, so you go and and people keep doing it. Well, that person leaves and it doesn't really have to be done anymore.
Yeah.
And it just keeps getting done just because. So there's a lot just at your fingertips. Also, people in businesses that are not manufacturing don't understand that there are supply chains everywhere. And it doesn't matter if your end product is a widget or if your end product is information or a service. There are still supply chains that are getting you there. And, I've met a whole lot of people who see their jobs as being some discrete thing. I do this and I pass it along. And they don't understand what came before them or what comes after. So in that, there is a lot of opportunity. Things like, I did this very unscientific survey on the subway in New York, watching people scrolling through their phones, right? And there still are a lot of people playing Candy Crush, and there's a lot of people mindlessly scrolling, I think, just reading the headlines. If you just chose an article about something and decided that over the course of a week, if it's a big article, over the course of a week, you'll spend a couple of minutes on every commute reading a few more pages. Well, you can educate yourself that way and see what other people are doing. I have an assignment right now that I'm trying to understand NFTs better. And,
so am I.
All of this activity taking place and people buying all this real estate. Well, how would it be used in procurement and supply chain? I actually get it now for how you use it in marketing or sales. And Tim, I know that you do a lot in it with sales, right? That you focus a lot on selling and all of that. And I find myself as well occasionally coaching people who are leaders of small businesses. And sometimes leaders of larger businesses. There are ways to approach your clients that need to be adapted depending, how are you coming in? I mean, this already, but how are you coming into the organization? Are you coming and dealing with the leadership, or are you in a much more competitive situation where you're answering RFPs? And, how do you answer a 260 question RFP? And, how do you adapt your marketing material to what the client, how do you figure out what the client really needs? So it's not exclusive to supply chain roles. It's pretty much every role that involves any kind of interaction with any kind of people needs to be thinking about stakeholder engagement. Sometimes they're suppliers, sometimes they're customers.
So while we're at 20 minutes, one of the things that we talked about in the prep call was about you saying that people needed to be digital savvy, and I wanted you to just say something very quickly on that, because I think it's so important, and I wanted your opinion on it.
Yeah. So Chris Sawchuk from the Hackett Group, maybe 6 years ago, said that the most important thing for procurement and supply chain professionals going forward was to be digital savvy. And he was right. He was like so right. That quote is still good 6 years later. And there's so much going on, and this has artificial intelligence. This runs on the blockchain. People who have been working for a long time and contributing for a long time, how could they be expected to overnight suddenly understand all of this? So they're relying on what they're hearing from the sales organization, and they don't understand how to use it or how to really put it to work for their company. And so I think, and I actually spend a reasonable amount of time coaching people who just don't want to be the ones to raise their hands. In fact, I've had people, after I've talked about something digital, here's how blockchain works, here's what artificial intelligence means. People come to me and say, thanks for explaining this. I didn't understand, and I didn't want to stand out in the crowd as being the only one, because I think everybody else in my company understands it. And I always say, you know what, everybody else in your company doesn't understand it. They're just better bluffing than you are.
Yeah, they're bigger bluffers, yes.
Yeah.
Johanna, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been so insightful. I mean, it's amazing to hear someone that's actually been through disruption and the changes that you've been through actually come on and actually share that experience, because there's a lot of people that can talk about it. It's a bit like the metaverse and blockchain. There's a lot of people that can talk about it, but it's about, as with a lot of things in life, I've found that the only way that I can understand this stuff is to be a continual learner. I've got a stack of books that I'm going to read over what you'd call the holidays, what we call Christmas, which is about certain things that I want to learn about. And it's great when you've got practical experience like yourself to come on and share that. And I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you so much, Tim. This has been a real honor. So thank you for reaching out to me. This is great.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I mentioned to our mutual friend, Helen Mackenzie, that you were coming on as well. So I don't know if she watched. She'd normally comment if she was watching. She's probably forgotten about it, but I'll tell her towards the rerun.
Okay, great.
So before we finish, remind people where they can find you.
Okay, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Johanna Martinez, and you also can find me if you want. You can send me a direct email, which is johanna@martinezjoe.com. Tried to make it easy.
Oh, fantastic. Johanna, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it. And I do love your collection of, you call them vases, don't you? Or is it, I call them vases.
Yes. Little things from our trip.
And plates. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks, Johanna. Thanks for today. Bye.
All right. Goodbye, Tim. Have a good holiday.
Thank you. Bye.